don't understand me well, ask me to repeat the questions, okay?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. Good to go. Okay, perfect. Okay, yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the MEV session of today. You know, we have excellent panelists here, so I think we're going to start off with just real quick introductions so we know who we have here, and then we'll hit it off with the questions that we want to cover today. And apologies for my voice; it's a bit destroyed, so I'll try to speak as loud as possible. But yeah, don't. Yeah. Please start, Shay. Let's start with you.
Is this on also?
It is. So this is more for the live
Amazing.
stream and the downstairs.
Great.
Yes. So you can speak loud here. Yeah.
Sounds good. My name is Shay. I work at Flashbots, in particular on our protect, searching, and building products. So basically, everything that happens from when you submit a transaction to enriching that transaction and merging it into a block to be proposed on chain.
Awesome. Thank you, Shay. So next up we have Will.
Hi, I'm Will. I'm Ecosystem Growth Manager at Oasis. Yeah, I sort of work on all the various ways that we can grow the ecosystem, and MEV and looking at these use cases is certainly one of them.
Yeah, and we have Nikita here.
Hey, my name is Nick. I am a backend team lead at Wendt. I participated almost at every product that we do have at Wendt as a builder, as a backend developer, so I have some experience there. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, guys. Oh no, you can take it. You can keep that mic. So let's see. Let's start off because we're going to be talking about MEV. Maybe we can start with what is actually MEV, and why does it occur? Maybe Shay, if you can take that question.
Sure. So I think there are a lot of ways, obviously, to answer this. One I like is that MEV exists because in permissionless systems, you want a way to encourage or incentivize actors to take certain actions. And you want to do this without entrenching specific privileged parties in the system. And a common way to do that is by offering them essentially permissionless bribes. So some sort of monetary incentive to take the action that you want. A fun example of this that I like is CryptoKitties. So in CryptoKitties, you want to incentivize somebody to call this function every 10 blocks that breeds your kitties. And the way that the protocol works is that people are given a small reward for doing this. And this is really important because in a blockchain or permissionless system, things are push, not pull. You have to actually tell it what needs to happen, so you need a way to incentivize some actor to actually take the actions that you want.
Yeah, that's pretty common in blockchain. There's always economic incentives for actors to make some actions. And the title basically of the panel is how to prevent MEV attacks. So my question here would be, is basically all MEV bad, or is MEV also good, right? Because you gave an example here, or maybe good MEV, but maybe somebody else can take the question, maybe Nikita or Will. What do you guys think? Is it all good or all bad, or is there good and bad, or trade-offs? Do you
want me to answer this or pass it on?
Yeah,
you can go for a bit, and then let's hear from the other
sure.
brands as well.
Great, I will start off with the spicy question. I think the more interesting questions to ask about MEV are not necessarily whether it is good or bad in isolation, but rather how the power and value in the system are distributed. Is it a cartel of privileged parties who are the only ones who can breed the CryptoKitties, for example? Is it nobody? Is the value simply lost to the void because the system is so discoordinated that it's not possible to actually perform the useful actions? Or is there maybe one unified network or system that's responsible for capturing and then redistributing the value? I think our view at Flashbots, at least, is that the way to maximize welfare in a system is for a unified but decentralized, critically, system to be the party that is responsible for generating and then redistributing MEV. And this is important because it means, first of all, that all the welfare actually is generated. All the useful actions that you want to be taken are taken. And then also, it means that that value is redistributed to all the people who participate in generating it according to how much they contribute. So
Yeah, maybe Will, if you can add, like, is that possible to democratize it like that? What's your opinion on this?
So I guess in terms of democratization, I would probably let Flashbots speak mostly about that. In terms of like my own thoughts, the thing that I wanted to add was more so, and originally when I, first about Sapphire, we talked about like MEV resistance and, making confidential mempools. I was sort of under the impression that, all MEV was bad. And sort of as I've like researched the space more and I've got into it, this has like grown to an opinion where like I no longer think that maybe the better way I would phrase it is like I think that like MEV that like exploits users, so like maybe front running is bad, but like there's a lot of advantage to like back running MEV, to sort of create arbitrage opportunities as well as keep the system in balance because. One of the more recent things I've recognized is like if you hide the mempool and you like allow these transactions to occur, then an arbitrage opportunity that occurs in the next block that everyone can see it all at one time will indefinitely like create a gas war, which that's maybe doesn't hurt the end user, but like it hurts the network as a whole. And if we're trying to create a stable network and one that has good gas fees and all that, this is like not ideal. So I think there's definitely use cases specifically back running MEV that are good.
Yeah, you also have a product that's trying to remove MEV, right?
We
or sandwich attacks, maybe more specifically. Yeah.
I can say, like, from a point of view, it's very hard to say what is MEV. For me, it's like neutral evil because, from my point of view, it's a problematic for users. But basically, it happens that because nobody actually understands how to build apps and how to interact with the public systems like blockchains we have. Like 5 years ago was nothing like this, except Bitcoin that was actually kind of not such open for use cases that we have right now. And like nobody, like 5 years ago, like maybe 3 years ago, nobody can't even imagine how to build like public systems of this level that are extremely decentralized, that actually have some privacy sometimes. And like what we have right now with MEV, like from technical point of view. Like in Ethereum, we have a state. Each transaction just changes the state in other matters. And if you try to imagine, actually, with changing the state in a specific way, we can manipulate some, like the parameter, we can manipulate it in this way that somebody can actually get some profits in it. Yeah. But actually, it's just because some apps are designed like that on Ethereum, and most of the developers it's very hard because we're experimenting. All the community actually have experiments and research building all these apps. Nobody knows what will happen next, and even like Aave and products like that, they trying to do a lot of research, searching for the way how something will be liquidated, how the tokens will behave, stablecoins will behave with the price going down too much. I mean, like. Because of all of these experiments, it's very hard to predict what will happen. And MEV is kind of what actually happens. I mean, like nobody knows about it. Kind of like 5 years ago. And from my point of view, we can solve MEV just by designing sometimes apps a bit more better. For example, we have a 1-inch fusion, and recently Uniswap just launched Uniswap X, and there is a Kozlov, and there are a lot of limit order protocols basically on the blockchain that actually do off-chain transactions. So it's kind of hard to arbitrage on that level. Yeah, we do have MEV on other side when market tech is trying to fill these transactions, but in this way you can have a bit more options as a professional, and Flashbots can help you there, can help you here. So it's kind of, from my point of view, hard to say is it good and bad. For me, it's like neutral. And the way how we can solve that, of course, there are great products like Flashbots, and we can do it into ZK. I think that it will be multiple actually options how we'll try to solve that. It will be not one of them. Yeah. So
maybe we can agree here that there is a lot of MEV present, but maybe it's transferring from being bad to being good for the end user in terms of it's not trying that much now to trap users in the sandwich attacks, but maybe help the fillers, as you said, where users are getting the best order, best pricing, instead of the worst pricing as it was back in with the sandwich attacks.
From my point, it's kind of like the same trade-off as you have with private keys. I mean, like 10 years ago, everyone had a password, and you can recover that. And right now in the blockchain, when you lose your private key, you lose your money. And it's the same thing about MEV. Like you actually you don't know how it works, but you need to understand that as a user. It's like extremely high trade-off that you need to understand and be okay with that. That's like what you need to understand if you are a blockchain user and Ethereum user right now. Yeah.
But maybe when you touch here, these new products like yours or Uniswap X, is it possible to bring these MEV resistant stuff on chain, or it's everything has to be like more off chain in order to enable to have the good MEV flow, not the toxic flow, right?
From my point of view, it's the off-chain stuff is not only because of MEV actually. The main point is that we are trying to bring mass adoption right now,
Yep.
and with mass adoption, any blockchain that we have right now can't scale enough, and that's the problem. And the only way how we can make this happen is actually bringing as much computation as possible off-chain. So basically, that's what Vitalik is talking about all the time. Let's try to do minimum computation off-chain, trying to optimize all smart contracts as much as possible. So basically, we want only to verify some computations on the layer ones and just do as much as possible off-chain. And all the apps that we have right now are trying to do the same. They're trying just to do as much as possible off-chain, so the gas price will be as much lower as possible, and they will have enough users. And actually, that doesn't matter which layer or which product you are using. EVM works pretty the same for everything, and it's just the design of not sharded blockchains actually.
Maybe Shay, you can add how you're tackling this now with your new MEVM and Suave. Are you doing this off-chain, on-chain? Maybe describe the system a little bit here.
The answer to off-chain versus on-chain is both.
Okay.
But I think if your question is about where does MEV activity take place, I think there are a few important reasons why you may want some supplemental system to address certain parts of MEV. So, for example, historically, I think earlier you mentioned PGAs. PGAs are essentially when you have a bunch of people competing for a similar opportunity, and there's a very single-dimensional way to have that competition, which is by bidding up your gas price. And this can cause network congestion, all things, for the main chain. So an early product that Flashbots had was the Flashbots auction, which moved this off-chain. I think now the way I would frame how we're thinking about this has more to do with the expressivity that you want to have at MEV time. So a slot on Ethereum is 12 seconds. There's a lot that you might be able to do in that period of time, and you actually want to be able to make certain commitments that are credible, that other actors can trust within that period of time. And right now, if your only credible commitment device is the layer one that you're submitting your transactions to, for example, Ethereum, the speed at which you can make commitments is 12 seconds, which is a lot slower than the speed that you need to coordinate at. And so having some other credible commitment device that is secondary or separate from the main chain is actually quite useful. Another reason you might want this is because you simply want to be able to make more expressive statements. So with the MEVM or MEVM or MEVM or however you want to say it, one other thing that it allows is it has additional precompiles for other protocols you might want to run that aren't things that the classic EVM would support. So I think those are a few reasons. You want to make other kinds of commitments at MEV time and run supplemental protocols that are not necessarily the concern of the L1. That's I think where some of that dialogue is shifting.
Okay. So maybe, Will, you can add here, my concern here is if you have a lot of things off-chain, it introduces a certain centralized risk, right? Similar to how it was when Uniswap, I think, blocked their UI, from certain jurisdictions, and then people had to pull up their own or interact directly with the contracts, right? So how can this be solved maybe with confidential runtimes, so we can maybe try to avoid that centralized those centralized parties?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think probably the research that Oasis still has to do a little bit in, but one of the things that we're most excited about is the fact that we can have a confidential mempool based on our trusted execution based blockchain. So by having this hidden mempool, a lot of these front running type attacks can be completely. At least maybe not completely, but there can be heavy resistance against these type of MEV. So maybe this is not something that can be applied to every chain, but it can be applied to Oasis and Sapphire. And so that's something that we're really excited about. But I just sort of giving Flashbots shout outs. I've really enjoyed reading their paper about Suave and MEVM because it's opened my eyes to all the other areas that we probably have to do research into, like what happens if we create a completely confidential mempool. Like, are there other things that we have to be thinking about in terms of MEVM, and so or in terms of MEV? So yeah, I think basically we have the ability to do a lot of MEV resistance on chain, but there's still like a lot of research to be done as to these other areas as well.
Maybe any input from Nikita or Shay on being like a centralized party, you know, that is in the middle here, you know, offering these off-chain solutions. Is there a problem, you know, if there's somebody knocking at your door, you know, you need to remove that jurisdiction from, you know, from accessing your product. What can be done here, you know, to keep it permissionless and decentralized?
From a point of view, I just want to say that compliance from a point of view is one of the hardest issues that we have right now. And as you can see with Tornado Cash example, that you can try to decentralize the protocol, but you can't decentralize people. And that's why it's kind of, from my point of view, we are obligatory to find the way how we will find an agreement with the regulators across all over the world to be like, with the balance. We will find equilibrium here. And if you're trying to decentralize, the only way here is basically to have a community that will be in multiple countries, that will do something on their own. And that's the only way how it's going to happen from my point of view, because otherwise, nobody is actually that dumb to see that, like, some guys from the United States is trying to help Korean hackers, for example, and they will definitely see that, and they will definitely sue this guy, so put him in jail. So the only way is if any jurisdiction wants to have something like this, the community there must do something on their own, and that's what potentially can happen with 1inch. But as a community member of it, I can say that we are trying all our best to be as decentralized as possible, but we are obligatory as members to be compliant with European laws where I'm based off right now. That's I don't know, that's the point. I mean, it relies on not the product, it relies on people that are working there and their ideals and when they're actually based. That's what I can say. It's not that much that we can do to compare, to fight with the governments. We only can find the way how we compromise and how we see the clearance here. Like what we can do, what we can do. That's the point.
Okay. Maybe, I think I'm getting the signal that we need to wrap up, but maybe just one more question, you know, what are, for all the panelists, what are the unresolved issues, you know, that are still need to be kind of in the near future, you know, that you're trying to solve, you're looking to resolve, you know, what's the vision here for MEV?
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of spoke on the Oasis perspective earlier. Like, you know, we have to look into, you know, is there other things to think about besides just like front running in these, like, is removing MEV entirely what we want as a network? And I think the answer is definitely no, but we have to find out, like, from our side, like, where it's beneficial to remove it and what we need to do to think about the beneficial use cases. So, but I'd love to get everyone else's thoughts. Yeah.
Sure, I think the remove MEV question is interesting. I might toss out that sometimes you want to be front run. There are good reasons why it's useful. A very simple example would be somebody fronting you the gas to pay for your transaction, sponsoring your gas fees, sponsoring your base fee. So I think it maybe is more apt to talk about the strategies than the mechanism themselves. Front running is just one transaction happens in front of the other, which I might note is by definition what a sequentially ordered transaction system looks like. So it's a little weird to say that you don't want that to happen. But I think maybe broadening out really the two things I would say we're focused on the most, or at least I think about a lot at Flashbots, are, first of all, redistribution. So today, order flow originators like users or wallets or dApps will generate value when they're transacting, and that value is largely captured by other parties like searchers or builders or validators. And so one key question is how to ensure that everybody who is participating in generating this welfare, including the originators of the order flow, are able to actually, benefit from the welfare that is generated. This is something we're looking at with order flow auctions and protocols like MEV share. I think secondly, per our earlier conversation, is decentralization. So as we increase the expressivity of what you can do off-chain through things like off-chain auctions, off-chain protocols, the discourse around intents. We build increasingly more centralized infrastructure to host those services. And so a key question is, how do you actually ensure that the MEV supply chain itself is decentralized? Because I think without that, you could potentially just still have the centralizing effect of MEV affect the domains that it's actually on. So this is something that we're thinking about with Suave as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Shay. Nikita?
Like, from my point of view, we can think about that from one thing. Like, let's imagine that all the participants in the Ethereum is kind of trying to maximize their utility function, and we want to find the point where it will be maxed.
Yeah.
And to find that, we need to manipulate with the parameters of MEV, basically to find the trade-offs and to find the multiple ways, how we diversify the ways, how we can actually make impact on MEV, how we can actually do some impact for how you change the state of the next transaction. And the only thing that we want to do right now, from my point of view, is that we want to bring this to find multiple ways and to show these ways to the users and to help them to understand these trade-offs, so they can actually see in which cases they do need to do this, in which cases they don't need to do this. The main problem that we used to have with MEV is that it's kind of not that transparent for everyone. It's only transparent for like a small group of people right now. It's more public. That's actually what was the point from my point of view. So from each side, as a protocols, we just want our users to benefit in all possible ways to maximize the utility of the protocol, of the app. That's why we are trying our best to find the way how they can do some trade-offs with MEV, use multiple products. Like we have a one-inch rabbit hole, for example, that is kind of actually the Flashbots backed in some parts products. So that's like one way how they can use us. There are other way how can actually they trying to maximize this. The way how they trade is using, for example, one-inch fusion, that is off-chain auction, where they don't need to care about MEV, but there are other trade-offs there. It's all about trade-offs and the ways how to explain them to users from a point of view.
Okay, so yeah, bringing it front and center for the user to understand and see, and how then to use your products to kind of go around it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Real quick, maybe just a question or two if somebody has them. I know we're running late, but so any questions for the panelists? Yeah, you go, Nathan.
I just wanted to ask, is there any solution that you see? Is there any solution that you see as realistic as to still secure that all that computation that's happening off chain, and still maybe commit something that proves that the calculation that was made off chain is correct on chain?
May I start? I just want to say, like, from my point of view, the future of off-chain computation is actually recursive snarks, and the verification of them on the layer 1. That's what about ZK Sync is, for example, and multiple other great layer 2s that built on ZK technologies. Like, from my point of view, the ZK is the future of it. And basically what's actually a lot of people saying that maybe ZK is have a higher impact on community than even blockchains from my point of view. So yeah, I think the future is ZK in this way.
It's interesting. I think a philosophy that we have, at least, is that privacy should be programmable. So depending on the use case, you might need different degrees of guarantees, and you might need different degrees of privacy. And there's a lot of ways. I think you asked in particular about what a practical solution would look like. And I think that's actually what we're quite interested in right now, is how do you provide people kind of the optionality and actually practical ways that they can get the guarantees they want? So that's why we're experimenting with everything from like trusted relationships to specific actors, to trusted execution environments and SGX, to like then full cryptography from there. And I think our view is that each of those choices has different trade-offs, especially in the MEV context. Latency is quite important. The speed at which you get to execute it actually impacts the quality of your execution, right? A price isn't something that stays around forever. So I think my answer to what is a practical solution to this really is that you need to provide people with a toolbox of different zones of privacy they can kind of opt into based on what they need and what their preferences are.
Yeah, and I guess just to follow up, on Oasis side, like a lot of what we're doing is on-chain, and like making the mempool confidential. But there are some off-chain applications as well, and obviously we're like a trusted execution environment-based solution. So we use remote attestation, which is sort of like the hardware version of a ZK proof. At least like that's sort of the framework I think about it. There's probably some nuanced differences there, but yeah, I think that's a very strong way, so long as you trust the execution environment, to use remote attestation to be very sure that the computation was done correctly.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We're going to wrap up here. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Nikita, Will, and Shay for speaking today. And yeah, I think we're going to move to the next panel. Thank you.